My name is Jason Jantzi. I'm affiliated with the National Special Districts Coalition, or NSDC, as well as the Special Districts Association of Oregon.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, members of the panel. Thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony. My name is Jason Jantzi, and I'm here on behalf of the National Special Districts Coalition, with members spanning all four corners of our country, from Florida to Washington, Texas to Wyoming, California to South Carolina. The Special Districts Association of Oregon is my employer. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Oregon Fire Chiefs Association, the Oregon Fire District Directors Association, and the Oregon Volunteer Firefighters Association. Collectively, these groups represent over 8,000 special service districts nationwide and tens of thousands of local elected officials who lead these districts. I currently serve as the Senior Risk Management Consultant for Public Safety at SDAO and as a policy advisor for the NSDC. My professional background includes extensive experience in public safety and regulatory compliance. I've served as an Oregon firefighter EMT intermediate, an Oregon OSHA safety compliance officer, and their public education manager. I actively participate in multiple advisory committees and boards, including the Oregon Governor's Fire Policy Council, which is currently co-chaired by the president of the Oregon Firefighters Council and a board member of Special Districts Association of Oregon. Additionally, I'm one of the original members of Oregon OSHA's Fire Service Advisory Council, where I initially served as Oregon OSHA staff and now contribute as a subject matter expert. My involvement extends to various rulemaking committees, such as those responsible for the current Oregon rules for firefighters and COVID-19 regulations. In my current role, I work directly with regulatory agency heads and over 270 public safety districts across Oregon, assisting them in managing a variety of risks while ensuring the public's need for life safety services. Furthermore, I advise the NSDC and its members on regulatory issues, including those under consideration by this panel. It's with this comprehensive knowledge and experience that I provide the following information to this panel. Over the past few days, we've heard extensive discussions both for and against this proposed rule change, including a lot of my colleagues at OSHA, the League of Oregon Cities, and the Oregon Sheriff's Association. In our association's comments, we highlighted many of the challenges that this rule creates. Today, I'd like to take the opportunity to share our collective story and provide some additional context. While my comments will use many examples from Oregon, these circumstances are confirmed to be similar to those in the other states that I represent through the NSDC. Both the NSDC and SDAO encompass many different types of special service districts beyond just the fire districts. SDAO, for example, has 36 different types of districts, such as irrigation districts, water and sanitary, utility districts, ports, and road districts. As I researched this rule to provide policy analysis to our fire district members, it became very clear to me that many of the concepts are sound risk management practices that I would promote, if they can be adequately funded. However, when they're inadequately funded or not funded at all, these rules place entire communities at risk of losing their emergency response organizations. In my public comments to federal OSHA, which I've included to the panel, I provided examples from emergency agencies of all types and sizes across Oregon. The common theme was that these rules shifted response resources into other roles for data collection and distribution. The associations that I represent are extremely concerned about the impact that a loss of emergency response capability would have on the communities that we serve. To address the argument of simply hiring more personnel, I encourage the panel to review some of the following research that can be available online, and I'm more than happy to provide it as well, including the recent report from the Department of Oregon State Fire Marshal titled Convening of the Fire Service Report. It talks a lot about retention and recruitment. These documents highlight increasingly difficult times that we have hiring and acquiring qualified individuals when resources are available to fund these positions a lot of times it doesn't make any difference. In many cases, funding is actually being reduced by a lot of different factors. As an example, I had a conversation with a recent Oregon fire chief, and he expressed his concerns to me about the funding reductions due to tax exemptions that are being offered by the city and state. He noted that 3 properties within his fire district generated 482 fire district responses in the last 20 months, which amounted to about 22 per month. Most of these are medical in nature, and with medical calls, this pays about 34% of the actual cost of providing this service. He emphasized that the fire service industry is in a dire situation, particularly for small rural fire districts in disadvantaged areas, which may start to collapse over the next few years. While there's a clear need for more personnel, the financial resources are simply not available to meet all of these requirements. As costs climb, organizations must balance their needs for their users against their budget constraints. Personnel costs are not only part of the problem, and they don't address a lot of the equipment and maintenance costs associated with this rule. Some of these cost drivers stem from the use of the NFPA standards as requirements. And typically, these standards are only used as best practices and not requirements. The volume of NFPA standards incorporated by reference makes compliance nearly impossible for small and medium-sized agencies and extremely difficult even for large ones in Oregon. For example, NFPA 1910 paragraph 8.3.6 requires tires to be replaced every 7 years. This would result in a $6,000 bill per engine, and that's regardless of tire condition. It's not financially feasible for our agencies. Another challenge that this creates is the spider web of other standards that the NFPA standards use when you use the must and shall language. As an example of this, NFPA 1582, which is the medical physical standard, refers to NFPA 1500, 1561, and 1584, all of which would become part of the rule language by this incorporation if you use the must and shall languages. In Oregon and other states where our members operate, there are constitutional and statutory limitations on revenue increases, and those are often decided by voters. These increases are temporary and must be renewed every year, and it makes it difficult to hire permanent staff. One fire district estimated that full compliance with these rules would require a 42% revenue increase. That's $420 per thousand. That's not viable even in affluent areas, let alone rural and disadvantaged areas. This leaves organizations out of compliance and subject to inspections with monetary penalties, which further reduces funds for essential life safety services. As a compliance officer, I issued citations with monetary penalties, which at times forced organizations to change. For public entities like emergency services, these penalties will come from taxpayers' dollar wallets and reduce funds for essential services. The agencies cannot simply stop providing service due to compliance issues, as this would be catastrophic for communities and workplaces regulated by OSHA. I'm happy to provide additional details, including budget impacts. In Oregon, our budgets start as low as $16,000 annually, and 243 of those 270 districts that I oversee in Oregon are under a $1 million annual budget. Without fire and EMS capability in some of these areas, fire insurance would likely be reduced or eliminated by carriers. Workers' compensation and health insurance premiums would rise due to the negative outcomes from workplace injuries if there's, again, reduced or no emergency response. The impact of this on all of our government members and ultimately the taxpayers would be catastrophic. SDO administers a public entity insurance trust that provides all lines of insurance to local special districts. This insurance trust is self-insured, using member contributions to pay for the claims brought against a district, and we've seen tightening in the insurance markets. I prepared a comprehensive section-by-section analysis that should be in front of you, talking about the impacts to the districts and their ability to comply and respond to emergency calls. The analysis is specific to Oregon, as that's the state in which I reside, but I'm happy to answer questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from OSHA?
Yes, Your Honor, Bill Hamilton. Yes, sir, we received your extensive comments and data, and we appreciate that. And if you have any other thoughts, that would be helpful as well. I have a question. You mentioned the NFPA standards and our extensive use of the NFPA standards, and we asked a question in the NPRM about the NWCG for wildfires, and wondering if you had thoughts on that and use of those standards as opposed to NFPAs.
Specific to wildfire, the NWCG would be a better, I guess, a better standard to use. I think being from Oregon, we spent a lot of time developing our firefighter standard, as well as Washington and Cal OSHA also have firefighter standards that I'm familiar with. The training piece for us, we started at that minimum standard of firefighter 1. Wildland firefighters also have a minimum standard, and then we built from there. But what we did in Oregon was we pushed the information back to the employer to determine what was appropriate for their circumstances, both politically, financially, you name it. I would encourage federal OSHA to look at that as well. I believe that the state of Oregon rules are very well written, are not prescriptive. I think that's the challenge that a lot of us have, is some of these rules are incredibly prescriptive, where if you look at a more performance measure based rule, it gives more flexibility.
Thank you. Your Honor, no more questions from OSHA. Bill Hamilton, thank you.
Any more questions from any member there? No? All right, on behalf of the solicitor, any questions, counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Any questions from any of the other interested participants?
No, there are not, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir, for testifying this afternoon.
Thank you, Your Honor.